Taoist is the Wade Giles romanization, which you can, yeah, better? All right, yeah. Taoism and Tao is like the traditional Wade Giles way to transcribe Chinese, which has been the most common in Europe. But in the last few decades, the new pinyin form has become the official standard for China and more widespread in the West also. So it's no longer Tao, but Dao, although the pronunciation is the same. It's in between T and D, and Daoism and so on. So Daoism is philosophy and religion, has these two aspects. And we'll deal basically with the philosophy part. It can be characterized by a skeptical relativistic attitude to knowledge and language. This is particularly true of Zhuangzi. And putting the emphasis on spontaneity, simplicity, and this notion of non-doing. Maybe we'll spend a few minutes talking about non-doing. Abstaining from engagement. Typically, while the Confucian sage is involved in politics, in action, is typically an official of the empire, the Daoist would just retire to the woods and disappear from the public scene. It's a typical career of an ancient Chinese literate was like as an adult would serve the state and do a political career, and then he would retire and become a Daoist and disappear from the public scene. There's a nice little story about that with Zhuangzi. The story goes that Zhuangzi is fishing in a river, and two officials come and say, "Our king wants to that you take over the administration of the state." And Zhuangzi says, "Do you know that in the ancestors' temple of your king, there's a tortoise that's been dead for 3,000 years, and it's honored, it's put in the highest place in the temple with precious brocade on it. And what do you think? That tortoise is more happy up there in the temple receiving all this honor, or would rather be in this river waving its tail in the mud?" And they say, "Well, probably in the river." He says, "Then go away, let me wave my tail in the mud." That's the Daoist, typical Daoist. So I will speak especially about Lao Tzu and the Dao de Jing. Jing or Qing simply means a book or a classic book. So Dao de Jing is the classic of Dao and De. And of Dao we'll talk about. De is usually translated as virtue or power. So this is the book of the virtue or the power of Dao. It's a small booklet, 81 short chapters. These chapters are like short poems, traditionally attributed to Lao Tzu. Lao means old. Tzu, it's an interesting word, means both master and child. So this is the old child or the old master, and modern scholarship debates whether, when and if he really existed. Some people think that the book is actually a compilation of various sources attributed to one single mythical author, Lao Tzu. Other people think that he really existed. A commentator Richard Wilhelm, who's an important sinologist at the turn of the 19th and 20th century, commented on this fact that the modern scholarship considers Lao Tzu a legendary figure. And he says, Lao Tzu would be very happy with that. So what we know about him is only like stories that have been told by other people, and various meetings with Confucius are recounted. And since we know Confucius dates very accurately, Chinese tradition considers Lao Tzu kind of an older contemporary of Confucius. One of the stories is a legend about the origin of the book, and I have a picture of that. The story goes that when Lao Tzu became old, and at the same time he was the historian, archivist of the Zhao dynasty. The dynasty itself was declining and becoming, the feudatories were taking over and the empire was kind of disgregating. Lao Tzu decided to leave, to go off to the West. The West means, in China, Central Asia, which is like wilderness. It's like tribal land of nomads and so on. So it was kind of like leaving the civilized world, so to speak. And the story goes that when he reached the pass, which was the end of the Zhao land, a guardian of the pass, a soldier or a spirit, we don't really know what the text means, stopped him and said, before you leave, you have to give us something, a text. You give us something of your own wisdom, a writing. And Lao Tzu had not wanted ever to write anything, because in fact, the book, the Dao de Jing, the first verse of the Dao de Jing says the Tao that can be spoken about is not the eternal Tao. So Lao Tzu never wrote anything. He would agree with Wittgenstein, who says that of which you cannot speak, one should stay silent. But this request of this soldier, of this guardian of the past, kind of touches his heart. And he's moved to actually write. But in order that his writing will not be misunderstood, it has to start with this crucial statement. The Tao that can be spoken about is not a constant Tao, eternal Tao. There's various ways to translate the word Chang. So the book is kind of like the traditional finger pointing to the moon. And Lao Tzu worries that people tend to confuse the finger for the moon. So the Tao that can be spoken about is not the eternal Tao. See, this word Tao, the core meaning of this word is road, way, path. And in a metaphorical sense, it's also like a path in life, and therefore also a doctrine, a norm, guidance, discourse, teach, communicate, teaching, typical of Chinese, like the archaic Chinese. Each character has a wide range of meanings. at that time, this word Dao was at the center of political debate in China, because it's the time which is known as the warring states. The Zhao dynasty is decaying, the feudatories make war with each other, and China is lacerated, destroyed by these constant wars. At the same time, it's a very alive time philosophically, and the philosophers are debating how to straighten out this terrible situation. What's the correct way? What's the right Tao? What's the right Tao for the individual? What's the right Tao for society? And so, the Daoists come into that philosophical conversation with a very radical position. They don't get involved in discourse with the Confucians or with the Mohists about what's the right Tao. They say, like, how can you know that something is the right Tao? So they move the discourse to a meta level. Not what's right and what's wrong, but can you speak about right and wrong, and on what grounds? What grounds your discourse? And especially Chuang-Tzu, they have a typically skeptical attitude to language and knowledge. And one way to read that first verse of the Tao de Jing is actually any way that can be talked about, can be taught, is not a constant way. Like all ways, all representations of reality are conditional and relative. And in this sense, the position of the Daoist is similar to the position of the postmodern thinkers, which realize that language is limited and all discourse is actually a map, but a map is not the territory, as Korzybski said. And as another nice way to convey the same message is Magritte's pipe. It says, this is not a pipe. This is a picture of a pipe. But mistaking a map for the territory is the key mistake that we do. So Daoists are very keen to, very clear about that distinction and about the limitations of language. But they develop it in a completely different way from postmodern thinking. Because postmodern thinking, if language is inadequate to contain reality, postmodern says, forget about reality. We analyze language and analyze social construct based on language. The Daoists take the opposite conclusion. If language cannot contain reality, forget about language. And they are completely experiential, intuitive. And they even turn around this word Tao, doctrine, way, and so on, and start using it to indicate what is beyond all Taos. The Tao of the Daoist is beyond all paths, is what cannot be described in a representation. They're interested in the territory, not the map. But the territory cannot be represented, otherwise you're again with a map. We've taken the habit of writing Tao in this other sense with a capital D, or capital T, or capital W, if we call it the way. The Chinese doesn't have capital, so it's actually a rather arbitrary way, but it distinguishes this way of using the word. So any way that can be told is not the constant way. Mao was talking about the utter simplicity of what is. That's a possible translation of Tao or way. It's that utter simplicity. It's that ultimate reality. So I would like to comment in detail just the first chapter of the Dao de Jing. It's a small fragment of the Daoist wisdom, but it's quite central, so I think it can give us a good sense of what the Daoists are about. So this is the second verse. It's a short chapter, like most of the Dao de Jing. And the first verse was Dao, Ke Dao, Fei Chang Dao, where that middle Dao that we've translated that can be spoken about, it's actually the same word Dao. Yeah, so one way, kind of a radical way to translate it would be like, this is name. Tao that can be Taoed is not eternal Tao. And name that can be named, that's the other verse, is not an eternal name or the eternal name. And what he means, it becomes clear in the next verse, which is, without name is heaven and earth's beginning. With name, or having name, is the mother of the 10,000 things. 10,000 for a Chinese is many, all. Interestingly enough, the word for thing is the same as the word for being, wu. So in some metaphorical way, all things are beings. One way of reading this verse is that what is beyond naming, the Tao with capital D, is the beginning of heaven and earth, is the beginning of everything, of the universe. But multiplicity arises with naming. Naming is the mother of the 10,000 things. So like up here, there's still just one. Here there's the 10,000 things. They arise through naming. And the next verse is, it kind of moves it to a more human level from, let's say, the metaphysical level of the first verses, and connects it with the idea of desire. By desire, Lao Tzu means attraction and repulsion, desire positive or negative. And what he's saying essentially is like, as soon as there are 10,000 things, as soon as I'm a separate being and see the world as composed of separate beings, then desire comes in. Then I'm drawn to what expands me, and I'm repelled by what threatens me. Attraction and repulsion. It's like evolution has brought us where we are through survival instinct. Already an amoeba moves in the direction where there's a gradient of sugar. It moves towards food and away from toxic stimuli. So let's say the law of this process of evolution is desire. But what Lao Tzu says then, if you are without desire, if you see through your individual existence and are in touch with oneness, then you can contemplate the wonder. If you are a separate being and you are moved by desire, you contemplate the boundaries. Me, you, this, that, mine, not mine. This is the ocean metaphor that Mauro also used this morning, and we both love it. One way to describe it is that the self is not a being, it's a doing. I'm kind of constantly constructing my own self. And the nature of this doing is what Lao Tzu calls desire. Identification with the wave is maintained by desire. And if the wave would be like conscious of itself as separate, identified with a separate being, it would be inevitably frustrated, because a wave is not a permanent thing. It just dissolves into the ocean, and it's not even water moving, it's just a shape moving through the water. I connect that to Buddha's first noble virtue, noble truth. The Buddha's first noble truth is usually enunciated as existence is suffering. And I think the way we have to read it is through the etymology of this word existence, which comes from ex sistere, standing out. So, as long as I stand out as a separate being, I'm bound to suffer. Suffering is an inevitable consequence of separation, because this separation is unreal. And I cannot grasp it, I cannot hold on to it. So, when we go back to Lao Tzu, what he's saying, like, no desire, no self, you're in touch with the mystery of existence. Desire and self, you experience the boundaries of reality. But the really interesting part comes with the next verse. Lao Tzu says, these two, ocean and wave, desire and no desire, named and unnamed, these two arise together. Yet we call them different names. Only our naming distinguishes them. I'm reminded of what Mauro was saying this morning. It's like even the movement of desire or the confused search for oneness when we are already one, even that is part of the one. That's Lao Tzu's way to say it. These two arise together, we just give them different names. Taken together, when we hold them together, they point us to the most hidden of the hidden, or most profound of the profound, to the ultimate reality of things, the gate of all wonders, the door of all wonders. Thank you. This. Okay, we'll have time to discuss that maybe later when we have a conversation with Mara. But I want to share with you a friend sent me this. It's for people who love cats. It's called the Dao Meow. It's in Italian, but let me translate it. It says, the meow that can be meowed is not the eternal meow. The cat that can be named is not the eternal cat, with capital C. The wild cat was roaming in the beginning, heaven and earth. The domestic cat is the mother of 10,000 kittens. From the outside, you can never see what animals see. I'm not sure where they got that from. And from the inside, never you can see what human beings see. Tiger and cat, two springs of the same source. They differ in their nature, and since they're so different, we think that they're separate, but they're one, and the line that divides them is very vague. Vague within vagueness, it's the little door of the cat opens on the mystery. Okay, I'll stop here. Yeah.